I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Oh, wait, sorry. My audio wasn't on. It's on now. Let's do this again. I see that you are in your lovely home with your tubular slide. It looks like it's a pretty fun place to be during the confinement era.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to be stuck at all. That's all right.
Is your home? I know this is like a converted church that you have. Is your home sort of a place that you have created and designed to sort of be playful in the sense of fostering good creativity around your home? Is your home a place of creativity, or do you usually need to like leave your home for that?
Oh no, it's a very creative space. It's full of like my inspiration, like tons of books and wacky things, and yeah, kind of I don't know. This whole place kind of seems like one of my pictures, or seems like maybe what the inside of my brain looks like, or something like that. So yeah.
Well, we hope to get inside that brain in the next hour. So this is very exciting for us. You've got a lot of fans. You've built up a pretty big base of fans of your work, both commercially and just within social media. You've got a really distinct style, and that's something that I really want to communicate to all the viewers today. And kind of, we're all interested to get in your head. We all want to see how you break down an idea, how you bring an idea to a client, how you're able to sort of use your personal work to launch your commercial work and all those things. Now, I'm going to assume most people who are watching probably know who you are, but there's likely a few folks who are tuning in who may not be familiar with you. So I want you, if you can, give the viewers a sense of, if they can't see your photos, if they can't go to your website right now or your Instagram feed, they can't see your photos, how would you describe your style and your work to them?
Um, it's kind of tricky. I guess like my stuff is pretty like it's pretty like whimsical. It's imagination based. It's kind of realistic with like my own sense of humor built into it, my own view of the world. It's a little bit cheeky. It's I've kind of like created the same images, in different mediums the same way since I was like a 12-year-old boy, and I think that like my work kind of still kind of looks like that. I have kind of the same interests I did when I was a kid, and I like the same things aesthetically, and those things I try and find a way to put those in most of the images I create.
You talk a lot about, or you just sort of said that, you're not really much different than you were when you were like 12. So describe some of those interests. What were those interests that you had when you were young and how they've carried on to your adult life?
I think like playing outside, playing dress up, using my imagination to create like a world around me kind of thing, whether that's like building a UFO out of cardboard, or hunting a dragon with fake swords, or chasing around other kids on bicycles, and watching weird old dudes work on weird old cars and things like that. I still like that same sort of thing.
And we
So
do. We see so much of these sort of classic automobiles and sort of classic automobile photography style in your photos. I think it's a dominant theme. Was there for you a point where you always, I mean, I'd say a point, but was there a continual acknowledgement of your interests along the way as you were developing photography, as you're like, oh, I'm going to become a photographer now, and these are the things I like, so these things are going to keep shooting? Or was it like you're down the road of photography, maybe a few years in, and you're like, I need to revisit these things that interest me? What was that process like for you?
it's always, yeah, it's been sort of like pretty natural kind of thing. And like as time goes on, you like as a photographer, you're constantly collecting like inspiration, but you're also collecting like a network of people in your life that you can borrow from. And if I don't know. I sold an old car like a couple of weeks ago, kind of thing. And the guy came to pick it up and he's like, "Oh, well, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a photographer." And he's like, "Oh, well, I just got my explosive like certificate. Like, I don't know if you could use anything like that, could you?" I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" He's like, "It means that I have a shit ton of dynamite and I have like a couple of 100 acres and we quite often blow stuff up." So like along the way, you kind of collect these things and be like, "Well, I would love to blow something up. I need a guy like you." And you kind of put that into your like mental Rolodex of like, things that will happen. He said, "Well, if you ever need me, you have my number." And, as soon as I can, I'll be up there blowing some stuff up and taking pictures of it. So yeah, I think you kind of collect these inspirations and collect the people around you and your resources as you
Right.
go.
Yeah, that's a very fortunate instance to have. No one's ever offered explosives to me, so I think you're very fortunate. um, in terms of your practical end of your photography, were there any moments, and if there were, if you can describe any moments where your photography sort of took a leap, where you noticed like, oh, my photography is sort of like this, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm a completely different photographer now, or I've advanced in the way that I compose and shoot and edit. Were there any moments like that, and can you recount any of them?
Yeah, I think that those kind of like moments all came from like the mentors that I'd had in the beginning of my career, kind of thing. So from like high school, I did like a internship at a studio, and like that kind of changed me that day. Like they had a dark room, and I could get down in there, and I could start to experiment with stuff and learn from them. And then, the same with, after college, I worked for another commercial photographer where I was kind of like, oh, well, this is how you make this stuff look, very clean and kind of pixel perfect, and have that kind of commercial grade or commercial quality to the images. So that kind of enhanced that. And then, as time goes on, like your style changes, but I think that a lot of things stay in common from when I started shooting to now. I think it's just with your technical ability, sometimes you lose artistic ability, and who knows what's better or worse.
What do you think is most advantageous? Experimenting on your own, spending a lot of time shooting on your own and putting the time in there, or versus mentorship, having specific people to say, this is how you do this is how you do that, and sort of hold you accountable to be able to do that. You seem to have had a lot of both. Can you describe the importance of one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I had some pretty strong like mentors in my life that were like, kind of drilled into, well, if you don't know how to do it properly, you can't do it. You can't do it the way you want to, or things have a certain rule. Like it is, there's photography is like 50% technical and 50% like artistic. And I think without having like the technical like abilities, like the artistic side sort of falls short. So yeah, trying to balance those two together, I guess, is a good
And
thing.
you're speaking about, how it's 50% technical and 50% artistic. And one of the things that you and I have spoke about in the past, and one of the things that when I'm referring to conversations with anybody else, I always say that this is, of course, my opinion, that Matt Barnes is one of the best art directors out there. And what I mean by that, for folks who may not understand, is that you have an ability to make things look good to the human eye. When you take a photo, I'm pretty sure that if most of us walked up to that set or that scene, it'd be like, that looks amazing. And it seems like the technical part of it is sort of just like, it augments what's already a great idea. And so, that ability, that creative ability to make something that's eye-catching to the human eye in real life, it seems to me to be such a huge part of making really standout photography. So for you, in terms of when it comes to when it comes to the technological side of things, what's your opinion on the technology? What are some of the things that really work for you and are really important to you from a technical perspective?
I guess like having all of my gear like work properly is mega important. Obviously, I like it to be clean. I like everything to be working properly. I like to take like a lot of care in the care for that equipment. I really like, to the world and the image that I put out there. I try not to be a technical nerd photographer kind of thing. It's not the glamorous side of things. I don't think it's like, but I really am. I take you know my love of of technology and being a bit of a geek and being into gear, whether it's old gear or new gear or anything like that, is it's definitely sort of like a driving force behind what you do. But you kind of push that to the side so you can live more like an artist and kind of seem more free and loose and organic.
And are you still spending time these days trying to keep up with technology and trying to learn new things, or trying to be more proficient with technology as it changes and adapts and grows? Or do you feel like you've kind of got it now and you don't really have to worry so much about the technical aspects of the gear anymore? Where do you sit?
I try and stay on top of it, kind of thing. I haven't. I've used like mirrorless cameras a few times, kind of thing. I haven't sort of like crossed that bridge into using a camera like that yet or anything. I use like a Nikon D850. It's a great camera. It does everything that I like. It's big. I have big hands. I like a big, solid, heavy camera. I like a camera to have like authority and a presence to it, kind of thing. I don't know if I could ever like, you know, I don't know. Sometimes you'd like to have like a lower profile and like use something small and that. But it's yeah, like a big heavy camera. Lighting hasn't changed really all that much. Like over the last 15 years that I've been a photographer, it's kind of stayed the same. I do like the ability to shoot with like studio lighting outside now is a lot easier than it used to be 10 years ago. So I use like a lot of like the ProPhoto like B1s and that kind of thing the batteries are great on them. You can shoot with like high speed sync, which is an amazing thing with the ProPhoto Pocket Wizards. So yeah.
Awesome. What I'd like to do now, Matt, I know I might be springing this on you a little bit, but you've got your photos there. You got your webpage up. I want to give folks, as we head into sort of what I call part 2 of this conversation, which is the meat and potatoes of it, really digging into how you come up with a concept, both for personal creative matters and for clients. And how you break that down, how you make sure that you're communicating your vision while also meeting the client's needs as well. And that's the fundamental core idea of our talk today. But I want to give people a sense of some of your work. So if you can, we've got your screen share, if you can kind of bring up your website and take us through some of the images that you remember the process on and give us a little bit of backstory with a few of them. And describe sort of what we're seeing and sort of how those ideas came out. We'll only do a few of those, and then I've got a whole list of questions. So we'll go from there.
Sure. I mean, I can talk about this pink picture right here. This was done about a year ago for a company called Loud, which was a weed company from San Francisco that made like a very potent strain of marijuana kind of thing, and they wanted like images to go kind of with this. And the clients came and met me at the studio, and they I'm not a weed smoker, but they kind of like explained to me that this was like something that was like kind of like very electric and bright and exciting and wacky and stuff like that. So I didn't want it to look like a massive acid trip or anything like that, but I wanted it to be kind of strange and kind of, I don't know, kind of sexual and over the top and a little bit weird kind of thing. So I had this idea that this, all of these things that would happen in this like motel room 420 kind of thing. So we built this motel room in our studio, and we just shot all of these strange things that would happen in here. And
when you say you built the hotel room in your studio, did you build the flats as well? Is that all actual flat walls, or is that the actual wall of the studio that we're seeing in the back there?
It's the actual wall of the studio, and actually that room's still like that, and my kids sleep in there now. So
amazing. And are we seeing just some technical stuff too? So much pink is happening in there. A lot of that, the pink and the yellows, look like a lot of those things are in fact pink and yellow, but how much of that is gel lighting or RGB lighting?
This is all done practically. So it's I have like a big like 10K like HMI light outside that window. The fluorescent lights inside are like a warm fluorescent, and they're just like balanced naturally kind of thing. And then everything else in the room has been painted
That's
pink.
amazing. So I think this just kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is when you're thinking about a scene, obviously RGB lights and gels and that color effects is really popular right now as the technology allows us greater access to it. But it doesn't necessarily seem to take the place of actually thinking about the color scheme that exists within your scene before the lights are on. Would you sort of agree to that? How do you balance what the lights are doing versus what you want to put actually in the scene with the art direction?
Well, I think like that sort of like practical art direction is something that I really enjoy. It's one of like the most interesting parts of the process for me is finding the props and painting the props and building a set. Like I kind of have my hand in all of those parts, which is I'd rather build a set than I would. I'd spend more time and getting more enjoyment building a set than I would lighting a scene, kind of thing. So it's, I guess it just really where your preference is as far as what part of the project you enjoy doing.
Is it, do you think, valuable for photographers to consider taking the time out to actually take let's say like an online course or a night course or something about creative direction or graphic design or art direction? Is that a valuable skill set for all photographers, or do you feel like this is just like your proclivity and that you just like to do this because you're you?
I think it would depend on what elements of a project that you enjoyed. Like I like doing those things. Like if I wasn't a photographer, I'd probably like to be like a set designer or something like that. So I mean, that's the side of it that I really enjoy. Yeah, I mean, there's, people are attracted to photography for different reasons, and there's a lot of like work that goes into it. I mean, if my side hustle was owning a goat farm, then I'd probably have a lot of pictures of goats on my website and stuff as well. So I think that just it allows you to bring other interests all into your photography,
Very cool,
I guess.
very cool. All right, let's go to the next one. What do you got for us?
Let's see what else I have here that's interesting. Now this is pretty cool. This is personal work. So this was shot down in New Orleans around this time last year as well, and this was just a personal project. So I sort of like hunted far and wide to find ways that I could fund this. I had like an ad agency get on board that said that they would show the work in their offices and help promote like a gallery show. So that was a way for me to at least have a chance to be able to sell these images. So maybe there was a way for me to get some of the money I invested in it back. So I took my crew down to New Orleans and we stayed down there a week or so and worked on a project, and I kind of had my hand in everything of this. I reached out to Facebook groups from high schools and public schools looking for kids in like a marching band that would be able to play instruments, and I would have messages and Skype calls with their teachers and kind of explain what I wanted to do with the project. And I was lucky enough to have this guy who kind of seemed like a pretty like-minded guy that was like, I think my students would get like a really real kick out of this. It would be something fun to treat them to, and that was very exciting. So.
I remember when this project came online, when you started showing images of it, and it's a really impressive project on the scale that it is for a personal project. I mean, whether or not how much money you spent or not, it looks like a lot of resources, whether man hours or financial hours, went into it. And you've came up with a lot of really great ideas in order to be able to populate that frame. So first off, I got like a ton of questions about this one. Number one is, where did this idea germinate from? What's your first memory of having the idea to do this?
Do you want the truth?
I always want the truth. I can handle the truth, Matt.
Well, I had a kid working for me that over the time that he was working for me, he sort of like found like a kind of like a spiritual side of his life kind of thing, and he got baptized, and I think that I saw that, and I saw this kind of saw this like rebirth of him kind of thing, and I began to look into that myself, and I was like, well, I don't really want to be sort of like baptized or anything like that into any sort of religion, but I'd always had like this fascination with like voodoo and kind of like darkness and weirdness and things like that. And at that time I was going through a lot of like personal struggles. So I thought maybe if I sort of like baptized myself in like this swamp with like this this weird band and this weird kind of like Baron Samedi ringleader, that maybe my sins would be forgiven and I would be able to start a new life.
That's awesome. And did you do any research into trying to be accurate in some way with, the hair, the makeup, the dress? Like, what's it referring to? What's it iterative?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they like down in New Orleans, they do like a lot like these sort of like march of like deaths. Like when people would die, they would like march with like a marching band kind of thing. So I thought that was like, kind of killing this sort of like this darkness, or this like this character that I was, or this person that I was, like kind of wiping that away would be a great idea. And I think that just because of like, still feeling like a child and wanting to feel more like a man, I thought that it would be, interesting to use children as the band. And then that kind of like ringleader, like he would play almost like like a Satan type character, or like this Baron Samedi, who's like like a spiritual being that you would kind of like have to pay to kind of keep off your back. He would like tempt you into these like forbidden things, and if you pay him off, he would leave you alone and go away, kind of thing. So
Very cool.
yeah.
And now, because this is a remote location and it's in the United States, tell us about how you decided on this location, how you prepared, like what kind of research did you do to be able to find a location like this?
I really wanted to shoot like the alligators. So the place we shot this at like an alligator farm that was like down in New Orleans, like maybe like an hour outside the city kind of thing. And I wanted like this swampland and marshland kind of thing. So I just sort of looked up on the internet and found this place that did these gator tours, and I called them up and kind of explained what my concept was, and they agreed to do it. I paid them like a location fee to use their place for the day and their resources, and then hired like animal wranglers to wrangle the alligators and stuff.
I know some people may be wondering, so I always like to mention if we can. Can you talk a little bit about the technical aspects that go into a photo like this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, having children and alligators in the same picture at the same time is not a good idea. So this shot here is probably like a mix of like 3 different images that are all shot within like a 10-minute window kind of thing. I wanted that light to be I wanted there to be lightness in the sky, but I also wanted the whole image to be kind of dark, and the brightest part to be these skeleton faces. So I think this was shot like around like sort of like 6 o'clock at night, just before the sun went away, kind of thing. So I think I shot the kids all first. So I stood all the kids in there, found their positions and everything, and kind of lined them all up how I wanted to. Photographed maybe like 10 frames of the kids, got the kids out, brought in the main guy, shot another sort of 10 frames of him, got him out as quickly as possible, and then brought the alligators in and shot
Amazing.
them.
And can you talk a little bit about, what lighting you used there? Was it strobe? Was it continuous lighting? I see there's probably a bit of haze. What type of haze? I know I'm kind of getting down to nitty gritty, but I want people to see the scale of what a personal project might involve that'll look like this.
Yeah, I mean, I have, just to the sides of this project, I have about like probably 25 people working for me that day. So I have two assistants running around in the background with fogger guns, like putting that haze into the background. There's like four people wrangling those alligators. There's people helping with the kids of how to hold the instruments, and they were playing as I shot, because I don't know, I like to get very into this character and kind of immerse myself in this scene and this concept as I'm going. I think there was 4 or 5 makeup artists working on this to get all the kids' makeup done and the main guy's makeup done, wardrobe stylists.
How many people did you bring with you
I-
from Toronto, and how many people, like percentage wise?
I brought 6 people with me, kind of thing.
20 some or whatever it is. So I want to look at more photos, and because I'm actually enjoying this. I think this is pretty cool. But let's talk a little bit about, on this subject, about you, or not you, but photographers in general, and doing personal work. And how developing personal work can launch or have a great effect on your commercial work. It can get you more clients. It can take your commercial work in a new direction. How do you balance the time you spend on personal work versus how much time you spend on commercial work?
I mean, I would be shooting personal work 100% of the time if I had unlimited resources financially, kind of thing. But it's I mean, I usually, like, the personal work that I do is usually what clients will notice. Or if I get like an email from clients, they'll be like, oh, we really like this thing that you shot, we want something like that. So I mean, I've seen that it's helped my portfolio as like time's gone by. And I don't know, it's hard to see it like directly linked to like finances coming in, but it's I think it helps.
Yeah, and sort of like, I'm going to put a little bit of a personal anecdote here, which is that like all artists like yourself, I spend a lot of money on personal work, on personal projects. And sometimes, that means I'm flying to places, I'm paying for the, what it costs to go on vacation basically, but all the added other stuff that goes along with that. And then sometimes they don't always work out too. So I'll be coming home with stuff that I'll never see the money back, like it'll never translate into another job or anything like that. So when we are talking about investing in personal work, what's your approach or your advice to people who are doing personal work in terms of thinking about the long-term strategy of it, not just, oh, I'm going to do this because I know it's going to get me work. Do you have any ideas around that?
I mean, I just shoot the kind of thing that I want to shoot. I don't think about it in a way like, well, what would my clients like, or, what would show off my technical ability, or what's trendy right now, or anything like that. I mean, I just shoot it because that's what I want to do. And I guess I'm lucky that clients have been attracted to that, but maybe it's, maybe they're attracted to the technical side of it, or the passion behind it. I don't really know, but it's, I guess I'm kind of lucky like that. I just really shoot the things that I really want to work on, because, I'm not doing it for any other reason other than it's the most fun thing to do. It's my favorite thing to do is to take pictures, and it's way more fun when you don't have someone telling you what to do. And if someone wants to tell you what to do, then they have to pay me for that.
And I think that's a great point. I think that if we can look at photography in terms of our personal projects, that if we do say, go on vacation and, spend money on makeup and hair and models and props and locations, that this is not a loss. This is not a business loss. This is the best use of our money. It's the best use of our time, because we wouldn't want to be anywhere else but there. Would you sort of say that that's the message?
Yeah, for sure. It's a fun way to spend money. It's still photography is still my hobby as well as my job.
We got one question here from the chat. This is from Elise Morton. Elise wants to know, what advice do you have for recent photography graduates?
I mean, like, build that portfolio. I think that it's, as a photographer, your work kind of has to sell yourself and speak for yourself. It's, people will see the work before they know you or like you or not like you kind of thing. So I think that, building up that portfolio of a mixture of client work that can show that you have clients and that you can work with clients, I think is very important, but also to show you're very passionate about what you do and what you can bring to the table.
When we're talking about portfolio, it's easy to just go out and take lots of photos and then I'll put them all on a website. It doesn't mean all of them are going to present your work in the best light. So in addition to just going out there and developing your portfolio, how will newer photographers be able to access the foresight of, what an agency might be looking for or what certain creative directors might be looking for? Any advice around how they can get that objective opinion to really hone in that their portfolio is presented in the best light?
I don't know. It's kind of tricky. I mean, I don't ever really think about what other people are looking for. I've kind of always just done what I've wanted. I mean, you could look at, if you look at sort of trends of what photography looks like right now, or, what commercial photography looks like right now, I don't know. I don't think it's the kind of stuff that I'd want to do. I'd rather be hired for, my own style or what I could bring to the table.
Excellent. While we wait for some other questions, let's go back to the photos here. If you want to, it looks like you got another one queued up. So tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, I think with all of them, with that last sort of like voodoo swamp baptism thing, like again, this is just another picture that are like kind of like self-portraits, in a way. This is, I think that like every little boy kind of like, plays with his best friend in the basement and, kind of imagines sort of like building this like robo babe or something like that, like a weird science kind of deal kind of thing. Just like, I don't know, little boy fantasy and stuff like that. I think I styled this basement that kind of looks like, any basement in like, 1985 when I would have been like the same age as these kids kind of thing.
Very cool. And what's your strategy when, like, it's a great location, you got the wood paneling, not everybody's basement looks like that anymore. So when you're looking for a very specific theme, one of the things that I've noticed about your photography is that the backdrop to your scenes is always very well thought out in terms of the scene. It references the scene very, very well. It's almost like the thing that it ties everything together. How much time do you put into finding locations, and what are some of your go-to strategies for locking in really good locations, whether it's for a commercial client or for personal use?
Well, for a commercial client, you're most likely going to work with a location scout kind of thing, so you can brief them on what you want, and then they would go out in the world and try and find that to the best of their ability for you kind of thing. For your own stuff, location scouting can be a lot of money. Like if if you're shooting an ad where you can hire a location scout for $1,000 a day, that's amazing. Most of the time in a commercial world, they're looking for a pretty, generic kitchen kind of thing. So it's, you may go and look at 10 kitchens to pick out a kitchen you want for an ad you're shooting for, goldfish crackers or something like that. But for personal work, you just kind of have to use all your resources, and sometimes like the inspiration for a shoot like that might start with that basement kind of thing. So you might have a new friend kind of thing, and you go downstairs in the house and you're like, whoa, this basement looks super retro, it reminds me of being a kid, and maybe that's the base of that idea. Maybe that's where it all starts.
It's funny. We got a comment here on the feed. Possibly a mutual friend of ours, Mr. John Thorpe, says he remembers calling you up looking for that location. How often do photographers call you going, "Hey, you want to give me the lowdown on where that was?"
Yeah, sometimes they do. I've had that before.
It's trade secret. We got another question here from Kyle Andro. Kyle says, can you ask Matt about his future in video work and the music videos? He did an incredible shoot for the Arkells music video, People's Champ. So talk to us about what motion plays in your art form and how much you want to engage in that going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing, like the motion. So I'm trying to figure out where my place is in that world. Um, as a photographer, like I said earlier, you kind of like you do like this, like the technical photography side of things, and then you also do the creative side of things. In the video world, it seems like those two jobs are separated into like a DP, director of photography, and a director kind of thing. So, which is kind of a tough thing. I don't think I'd like the idea of shooting someone else's idea because I do like my own ideas. But then it's kind of hard to have someone else shoot your idea as well. So I'm trying to figure out like what my role is in that. I've shot a bunch of TV commercials and some music videos, and I've played around in that world. It's definitely not as enjoyable as photography for me. Um, I guess I'm on a bit of a power trip with photography where you get to have your control over everything, and with motion you can't do all of those
Right,
things.
right. And has motion also forced you to learn some skills that maybe it's hard to make the time for? Like, have you had to sit down and learn how to edit, or were you able to just go like, I got this idea, and you're going to pull a team together? How is motion integrated into your life? And in what ways have you had to like kind of learn new skills?
I haven't really. I guess like learning like what the role of a director is, and you know, it's weird in the commercial world. It seems like a director is really more like a salesman than anything else. You're trying to get an agency to hire you to do a project. So it's definitely less artistic. It seems, yeah, you're more just a salesman of trying to sell this idea
Well, I
through.
know that certainly in the motion in the commercial world, typically when directors or production companies get a job or asked to pitch on a job, the agency has done about 90% of the creative work. And they're basically asking, three directors, give us your best take on this idea and how much it's going to cost. And then they sort of award it to one of them. So from a photography perspective, when you have a commercial client approach you, how much of the creative is complete in which you just have to sort of fill in the blanks, and how much of it do you get almost full control? They're like, when they say to you, do you have any ideas? Where does it sit for you with photography?
With photography, I mean, I get all kinds of projects. I get projects where I have clients have like layouts drawn up already, and I really just have to execute it, kind of thing. But then I also, have people come and say that they want, they want the full experience. They want the creative ideas. They want me to bring stuff to the table, and that's a fun way to work.
We've got another question here. We got one from John Thorpe. Oh, I just lost it. There you go. John asks, how has the family dynamic slash life impacted your work? Your whole family seems pretty creative and tight when it comes to letting you be a bit wild. So you're one of the classic things where it's like, bring the kids in. We're doing this thing. What's it like now having a family and trying to be creative and leveraging or making time for them? How does that play out?
I think that like having kids is an amazing thing. I think that it like teaches you to use your imagination again, which is a pretty wonderful thing. Like I mean, I spent like an hour and a half this morning just whittling down a wizard staff outside the place because, my kids really like this movie that has this wizard staff, and I cut down this tree on the weekend and it had like this gnarly branch on it. So I thought it would be, pretty fun to turn that into this magic wand kind of thing. And it is amazing that like, they can really see that magic. And I think that that's really fun. Like that's kind of how I approach my pictures. I try and see, kind of use my imagination to see things that aren't there, and you kind of invent them and play pretend. So they're definitely like an inspiration in that way. And I think that having them be part of a creative environment is a really special thing as well. They've been on set, lots of times where we've built things, or even neat opportunities. I could be photographing like a kangaroo, and they would get to come to the studio and meet the kangaroo. I mean, that's pretty special. I didn't get to meet a kangaroo as a kid.
It's true. That's very, very exciting. Before I forget, because there's a bunch of photos that I do still want to talk to you about, but I want to make sure that we are sticking to our theme here. Let's talk about a little bit more. I know we just sort of chatted about it as well, but how do you adapt your personal work to fit the needs of a client? What's that look like? Because some of your work is, dare I say, like some of it's daring, some of it's really out there, some of it's really like explosive in nature, and that's not always something we equate to this idea of commercial work, which is safe and conservative, especially in North America. So how do you talk to commercial clients who go, we want you to do you, and then how do you do you while making sure that you're meeting strict advertising guidelines?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a funny way to look at it. Like, I mean, you could look at like a Harley Davidson as being a badass motorcycle, but anyone can ride a Harley Davidson kind of thing. So I think that like it's neat that I have like sometimes like the most conservative clients want to hire me because they want to do something that's like maybe a little bit more outrageous, or they want to kind of push some boundaries. And it doesn't mean there's going to be 20 strippers like dangling all over a Lamborghini or anything like that. Maybe it's like just a different approach to how you look at selling toilet paper or something like that. It's just kind of flipping that idea, and hopefully like the brand managers on the client side, usually those people are pretty cool. Like they I don't know. I'm not really a very rebellious or badass person in real life. That's sort of like my work is my outlet for that. I mean, I'm a pretty soft guy. I like to I have very close friends. I'm not a wild party guy or anything like that. But I do like to experiment with things like that in my photography more so than in real life. So I think if they kind of understand where I'm coming from and that it's pretend and that kind of thing, I think that means that we can kind of work well together.
We got another question from the feed here that I think is an interesting one at this juncture, which is this individual, Zlad, asks, how did you start finding your first commercial clients?
I think like just like by putting like your work out there kind of thing. I think that I'd started as soon as I moved to Toronto, I started telling everybody that I met that I was a photographer. And I think that luckily that kind of got back to people that were in search for a photographer kind of thing. Like, there's always people looking to have pictures taken, and I think through that word of mouth and through like building a network like that, it's you never know what kind of job is going to turn into something else. I mean, I shot some real estate portraits like a year ago, and it wasn't a very exciting job, and I did a really nice job of it, and they were very happy. And a week later, I get a call and said from this guy who was like a marketing executive, and he's like, oh, well, you shot this beautiful portrait of my wife, and I just love it. It's my favorite photo of her. I own this agency. Like, do you do commercial work? And he hadn't seen any of my other work. He just saw this picture of his wife that he really liked. And I was like, yeah, I have my website. I do lots of commercial work. And, since then I've worked with him 3 or 4 times, in the last year or so. And it kind of grows. So I think just like, building your network and not turning stuff down, or turning like small opportunities into bigger opportunities.
Have you ever had to play sort of, I remember like, I'm going to give a little preface to this. I remember, back in the day with some of my professional photography friends, they used to, I mean, this is like more than a decade ago, they used to make out basically postal, like postcards, and with sort of their photography on it, and they would just like get 10,000 printed, and they would send them to like cold call and send them to like every art director, every photo editor that existed in North America. They were just like aggressive with it, and that sort of seemed to be one of the strategies for sort of building clients. And some people had different opinions about saying, oh, it was a waste of money, and others said, oh, I got this contact and this contact. Early on, you would have been around that sort of generation, the pre sort of social media sharing. How did you get the eye or the ear of different photo editors or different agencies? Did you have to be aggressive in some ways, or was it just sort of like people kind of found you because you were passionate about the work that you were doing?
I've hustled myself like that for sure. I've sent out the postcards. I've done that. It's like you can't really seem to win with that kind of thing. It's like, one time they're like, oh, you should mail your stuff out, and then like a week later, it's like, well, we need to conserve the forests. Like, no more paper postcards in our office, please. And and then you try and you try and do cool things to promote yourself as well, like having like gallery shows or being part of group shows and things like that. So I mean, I mean, that's why I'm on this, live call with you right now. I'm marketing myself. It's, as, it's what is part of. I want people to know that I'm a photographer. I'm out there and I'm available for hire.
So now that you've got, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here, but I want to continue this thread about sort of the commercial process. So you've got a client who's agreed to work with you, wants to work with you. They say, okay, you guys have agreed on the creative in sort of in concept. What's your next steps as a photographer? How do you produce the next steps between agreeing on the creative and making it happen? What's that look like, and what's the timelines generally?
Usually with photography, our stuff's a pretty quick turnaround. So we might get a call for a job, you know, one week kind of thing, and then we have like probably like a week to prep it, and then a day to shoot it, and then a day to retouch it, and then it's done. So usually like the turnaround on a commercial job is about 5 days.
Cool. I see you got another photo queued up there, so let's move into this one. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a client that like a pretty conservative client. This is for the dairy farmers of Ontario, or dairy farmers of Canada kind of thing, where their kids crying over spilt milk. I mean, it's an idea that's been done 1,000 times, and I was really lucky that they got to that they really embraced what I wanted this creative to look like. I wanted to shoot these little kids at like camp kind of thing, like little Boy Scout camp. And I don't know, I can picture this little girl. She was like, the little girl that won all the awards and did everything, and you kind of wanted to hate her, but you didn't, because she was just so lovely. And I think it's just kind of cute to see her crying.
So let's use this as a bit of a template. Talk to us about what you remember from this project in terms of what did the client say to you? What did they already have in mind? In that conversation you may have had with them, and then where this was produced. Was this shot in studio with an artificial backdrop? Was this on location somewhere? It's sort of hard for me to see the detail. So give us what sort of all the parameters of this project.
Yeah, I mean, this is shot in studio kind of thing. So we cast these kids, probably see a couple of hundred kids, and then kind of decide the kids that we really like based mostly on their performance of pretending to cry. So, we spend like a couple of days bringing in a couple of hundred kids and having them pretend to cry, and kind of file them down, in a rating system of how well they performed, and then choose who our favorites are and present them to the client, and hopefully the client agrees with us. And we give usually our number one choice and a backup to that choice as well. So yeah, and then we built these like simple sets in studio. This one was like a picnic table, and yeah, it's shot with strobe in studio kind of thing. We had a food stylist style the spilt milkshake in the foreground. It's shot wide angle because they wanted the milk to take up as much real estate as the person kind of thing. Just so the person wasn't the complete hero. But I mean, I like the way that like it kind of leads your eye around the image kind of thing. You go from that cherry and kind of follow the straw up and to her, and I think it has a nice sort of like balance. I mean, it looks very commercial, I think.
And
so.
even when we're talking about, I referred to this earlier, when we talk about the backdrop, I'm just looking at the trees and the height of the trees and how they're all designed to basically draw your eye to the little girl. How much, talk about that backdrop, how much thought was put in? Was this sort of like one that you just found somewhere, or did you actually specifically go, this is how it needs to look? How much impact did you have on that?
I think I just shot that out the window of my car in Hyde Park on my iPhone, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, take us through another one.
Yeah. Well, this is a pretty cool project. So, this is for a friend of mine's company called Sweet Jesus. They were like an ice cream company, or they still are an ice cream company. And I don't know, when you're working with your friends, that's pretty cool because they really will let you do whatever you want to do. And I just wanted to build like a really kick-ass fort for kids. He wanted to feature a bunch of kids in an ad eating ice cream, and I kind of like this idea of like this, kid gang, kids playing in the playground, being a little bit rebellious and badass, and I really just wanted to build a fort in the studio, to be honest. So
and when I'm looking at this, I'm just going to leave this up for everyone while I'm talking here, but I'm seeing what looks like would take quite a while to get completed, not just in corralling all the different kids and making sure you get the right kids in the right spot, but just in terms of your set deck, making sure that you're designing the set and then you're also painting it and building it. A project like this, how long does this take to pull off? Do you remember sort of that process?
Yeah, I think it took 2 days. We gathered up all that material in the morning from. I got kind of lucky because a friend of mine had just moved into a new place and his garage was full of junk, and he knew that I had a pickup truck, so he asked if I could help take like a load to the dump. And I went there that day and I was like, oh, this stuff's all perfect for this set. So we just used all that to build it, kind of thing. So I'm lucky that I have like one of the people on my team is a guy, Vinny, who's he's kind of like my go-to guy for building stuff and making things. So him and I threw this together in a day.
Speaking of team, obviously in any creative endeavor, you're only as good as the team members that are helping you realize a vision. How have you? I'm trying to make a sort of a two-part question in the sense that I want you to help viewers understand the importance of a team, how to build that team, and who are going to be the key members of that team and how they influence your work and things like that. So talk to me a little bit how over the years you've found people to partner with on projects, how you found synergy with different team members, and who have been the most valuable to you in that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think hiring people that are good at the things that you're not good at is kind of the key to making a successful team. I kind of have like a vision of how I'd like things built, but I don't really have the technical ability, or I didn't. I've learned a lot of stuff from him, but I mean, he's still, he's a great carpenter and a great builder and a great MacGyver kind of thing. And the other thing too is I like being a wacky creative person. When it comes to organization and timing and things like that, that's something that I'm not very good at. So having a solid producer that can organize your life is a very important thing as well. So it's I have Natalie. She's worked with me for like the last I think 7 years or so. Just kind of keeping everything in my life organized, my schedule and appointments and working with clients and being a middleman, between people. So, I don't need to look like the bad guy, and, I have a hard time telling people what things cost, and she definitely doesn't. She can say it like it is. So
imagine yourself, or imagine that you have a person like one of our first questions. They're just coming out of photography school. They don't have a budget to particularly hire all these individual people. Are there some partnerships that they can start looking at early on that might help advance them. And one idea, just to sort of plant the seed, is say you want to do still life or product or tabletop, finding somebody who just went to school for like food styling or as a stylist of some type and going, hey, you need content, I need content, let's work together, and developing relationships organically that way. Any advice around that for photographers in general?
Yeah, I mean that is a good approach. Like quite often, like there's makeup artists and stylists that need images for their portfolio, so that kind of like collaboration can be very fun. But it with that collaboration, you're quite often you're giving up your own vision, and you're allowing someone else's vision to take over, which maybe isn't. I don't know. It could work for some people. It might not work for other people. I mean, in the beginning, I just like to hire people, even if it cost me more than I was making. I like to hire the people so I could tell them what I wanted.
Exactly. All right, let's go to this next image.
Yeah, this was shot for like the Canadian Armed Forces, and I think that this is like a way to try and like even on commercial projects to try and shoot things that you can use for your portfolio. So I got hired by the Canadian military to do these recruitment photos, and the recruitment shots were for kind of boring jobs in the military that weren't being filled. And my client was, I think like after the third day of shooting it, she was like, "Oh, like, are you really enjoying this? You're having fun?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's cool." And she's like, "Oh, like, what would make it more interesting?" And I was like, "Well, it would be more interesting if they were more interesting like jobs, that we were kind of selling." She's like, "Well, if you do a really good job trying to sell these, non-interesting things for me, my husband, he like runs like the search and rescue unit in Halifax. On the last day, I'll take you down there and you can shoot stuff of these divers training," which sounded really cool. And so yeah, I did the best job I could, and then on the last day, she took me down there, and I got to shoot down there for a couple of hours, and that was really cool because this image won a lot of awards for me, and people reference it quite often. So
and that's interesting because how do you tackle trying to be creative with things that don't have as much flavor, you don't have as much control over, or maybe sort of average and mundane? I don't want to say mundane, but not ones where we typically can have, like, they're not all 420 kind of, marijuana companies, right? Like, you have to do things that are a little bit more subdued. And so what's your strategy? I mean, when I look at that photo, and I'm going to go back to it here. Oops, I can't go back to it. You've already changed photos. That's fine. Everyone's got it in their memory.
There you go.
You're going to bring back, there you go. Thanks. When I look back at this, I would say that there's not a lot of indications in there for me that that's a Matt Barnes photo. I mean, there's certain aspects of the contrast curve that I think is pretty telling of your style. But it is very beautiful. It's very dynamic. And you've taken something that I think a lot of other photographers may have struggled to make as poignant, and you've done that. And so what's your strategy in terms of like taking something that is where you don't have all the flavor and making something that is flavorful in the image? What are your thought processes around that?
Yeah, I mean, just trying to find something really interesting on it. I mean, like, I did this image that I've just loaded up for like Canadian Tire for Mastercraft tools last summer, and it's they really just wanted me to shoot like all 100 of their like tools or something like that, and that's kind of boring. But then I kind of like I kind of got really excited about building this like Tetris kind of wall, and I built this big wall and I hung them all up in there, and it was kind of fun, trying to balance them and fit them all in, and I guess just trying to find positive things about any situation. I mean, photography is still a very, very fun job. So it's, whether, the interesting thing is getting to meet someone new or travel somewhere or do something, or even shooting these tools in a studio. I mean, you can work with your friends, you can listen to the music that you want, you can just have a good time doing it. And, even if it's a really shitty job, just order a really good lunch and enjoy the company of the people that work with you.
I think that's one of the takeaways I know when I'm on set doing a job. It's like, even if it's the worst job and it's like, you know, a hot studio, you've been there for 12 hours, and there's always other problems. At the end of the day, I'm like, I'm still in a studio pressing a button on a camera. This is pretty awesome, you know, like
it's still a very fun job. It's, you know. Yeah.
Just closing out here, this has been such an awesome conversation, but give us a sense for you, just kind of bring everything full circle. You know, your message in general to people about art form and creating good work and being passionate about your work, because I think more than anything, Matt, you have this playful, childlike approach to your work that I think sells itself. It is so full of energy, and your personality really comes out on camera. So your advice to people, sort of final thoughts about creating their own style and having the same level of energy that you present in your work.
Yeah, I think just shooting the stuff that you really like, so you can be very enthusiastic about it. You know, if you love horses, like include horses in lots of your work. If you love clothing, try and focus on that in your images, and just try and shoot the stuff that you really like. I think that, like, your passion will be seen in it. So
awesome, Matt. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I always enjoy it. I always come away from it feeling very psyched and very inspired. So thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us today. And we wish you the best when everything returns to normal, and the best in the meantime as well with your family. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It's been fun talking.
Thanks, Matt. Take care. Bye-bye.